came to Montessori in my 30s when my children were going into my first three were just going into teenagers. I ran a Montessori parent toddler programs for 16 years, and I suppose that is what really launched me into wanting Montessori outside of the classroom situation. Parents were quite reluctant to do Montessori at home or scared to do Montessori activities at home with their children. They wanted it to look perfectly. So I kind of started consulting with parents that were interested. I mean, actually, Simone Davies was my first home consult, because she was a parent at my school in Sydney. And she was really interested, and I was interested in how she related to her children. So we kind of, and she worked for me for a couple of years before she did her training. So yeah, we're very close and collaborate a lot. And yeah, so I just got really interested in helping parents implement Montessori principles in the home environment. So and it started with toileting, because of course that's one of the biggest challenges in the home environment, and everything relates to getting our children to cooperate with us. If we're struggling to get them to cooperate with anything, we'll ditch it, so if we're doing it too difficult for them. So it's about simplifying your home environment, really. And even in the classroom, I learned with having parents in the classroom that if I could get the parent on board in the classroom, the child was much more cooperative. So it's about making it simpler enough for actually the adult to understand what the child's learning, and really slow down enough for children to really enjoy the process. So that's really how I love to help both educators and parents, and it's what got me out of the classroom and doing it full-time consulting, because I felt I could make more impact that way.
I will go to the first question. I will start with the questions that the people were asking when you were registering. I think we will not be able to cover everything. So I will start with some of those, and then I will cover the questions that will come here on the Zoom. So we actually help the people that came live online and now. And Ferne, my first question. When it comes to practical life, I get frustrated with all the mess. When we are transferring vegetables to a bowl, my 11-month-old wants to experiment with throwing them on the floor instead, and then she gets frustrated if I take them away. Should I hold a boundary even if she doesn't understand why at this point, or let her do the science experiments and waste half of our dinner?
Okay, so this, just clarify, is this carrying something for a meal, or is it just transferring vegetables? Or
as I understood, it was for dinner.
It's for dinner. Okay, and she's 11 months old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, I think little ones, like for instance, taking something for them to carry that's manageable, and letting them being the model more of how things, like in the classroom, in the baby class, for instance, or with my grandchildren, I'll say, glass or plate, choose. Do you know what? So giving them something that's manageable for them to carry to the table, a glass with one sip of water in it, or, just carrying the fork and the spoon to the table while you model carrying the plate. Because yes, at 11 months old, they are into seeing the natural consequence of something. They'll want to be dropping things and picking them up. The more simple steps that we give them in the beginning with a very clear boundary, the more that they will be able to do more and more steps in the process. But if we give them something that is probably not age appropriate, they're going to be doing the inappropriate thing and we're going to give up. So for an 11-month-old, like carrying the bowl with a full, or just carrying the apple to the table, and then you modeling cutting the apple at the table so they see the apple being cut. Or yeah, that first year is really about letting them observe. That's why I love the 2-step stool, and letting them observe one simple step, and yes, having a boundary on what step they can accomplish, rather than letting them touch everything right from the beginning, will mean that you can see what they're capable of and add one step at a time. I hope that answers that question sufficiently.
I hope as well. I will. It did to me. Let me find another question. How to manage our son when he refuses things which are needed? For example, drinking water, brushing teeth, getting dressed, etc. I don't have the age.
Yeah, you know, we were chatting just before that communication and skills in gaining their cooperation, whether it is cutting an apple, brushing your teeth, as you've mentioned, getting dressed is one of the biggest challenges. So usually it is about there's 3 skills that us as educators for under 3 and parents have to learn. We have to slow down. The biggest frustration for toddlers and babies is that as adults, we move far too quickly for them to get the steps in the process. So if you were at my talk on practical life, you'll see that movements have to be very slow. If we're talking and moving at the same time, our children will miss what we're wanting them to do. So anything that involves movement, it really helps if we don't talk at all. And dressing is one of those things that I model. I used to actually dress an adult at my toileting workshop, just to show them how slow you must go in order for a toddler to get the steps in the process. Having a dressing stool is paramount because it kind of sets a boundary for where we're getting dressed. I speak to a lot of parents who are chasing children around the house to get them dressed, or, you know, so confining the space. And with a young child, you can do a very low stool, you know, those little toileting, they sell it as a toileting step. It's only about this high, and it's not really appropriate for a toddler to use at the toilet, but that little step, you know, which is about 10 or 15 centimeters high against a wall, you've got to do dressing away from all the activities. Many parents use a distracting object, you know, to keep the child occupied, but then they're playing with a toy while you're trying to get them to cooperate to dress. So, you know, the clear boundary of this will be available when you're dressed. You know, I will put your little monkey over here and he'll watch you dress, and you can have him when you are dressed. So, you know, setting boundaries is the key to getting cooperation, whether it's dressing, you know, toileting, brushing your teeth. Brushing your teeth was a challenge I was talking to a parent about yesterday. It's better to model brushing your own teeth and letting them brush their teeth at a very minimal process from young, because once you get their interest, you'll be able to demonstrate something, the extent of how well they need to brush their teeth. But it's better to model in your own mouth and let them just be sucking a toothbrush beside you than trying to force a toothbrush and trying to force the activity to be perfect from the beginning. Because really their milk teeth, you know, yes, we want them to learn to have clean teeth, but I found it's one of the things that parents really do get a lot of resistance about, because they're forcing something in their child's mouth rather than just doing it at very little incremental times. In the bath is a good time to brush teeth, because they can pick it up several times, and especially when they're really little. And you can just do a little song. This is the way we brush our teeth, brush our teeth, brush our teeth. Something that makes it fun and engaging, rather than I've got to have my child's teeth clean, parents need to bring a bit of humor into these simple activities as well. Getting dressed, I found a dressing stool, having children not at a place where their toys are. Put it against a cupboard in the neutral space. I do have some getting dressed videos on my website, which I can give you a link to a dressing video, and I probably do a few demonstrations on the lecture that's coming up, because dressing and undressing is a first independence, and it gives them a lot of confidence. So really persevering on a daily basis when you're in a calm space. So, collaborative dressing can start as soon as they're standing up. And the key is getting them off a change table as soon as you can. So the change table makes it a very adult. And I've been to houses where parents are still changing their child who's 3 on a change table. So I know that it's a worldwide issue, because we want to confine them and get it done quickly. But as soon as you're getting them onto the floor and getting down to their level, whether it's dressing, toileting, everything, it's about giving the child options so that you can start getting that communication of collaboration as young as possible, so that you can build on that school. If you're standing up dressing your child from the toilet, for instance, from when they're 1, by 18 months, you've already got quite a lot of collaborative skills going on in terms of listen to me, stop, and simplifying your language. Arm, leg, sit, stand, pull, push, doing single word instructions for all the way up until they, 2, and will help them actually collaborate with the movement. Whereas if we're doing long, come on, now it's time to get dressed. Let's get your stool. Let's sit over here. We're going to Granny's house today. And the more you're talking, the less your child will move and cooperate. So we're going to Granny's house. Time to get dressed. Stool, go, sit. You know what I mean? So it's actually separating, so that when you need them to move and listen to you, it's only a little bit of language for them to interpret, rather than long sentences which make them stop and do nothing.
Thank you.
I think that will help with all aspects of you getting their collaboration in those activities.
Yes. Also, I will share your website in the chat so everyone will see it. So
it will be in an upgrade this year, now that I'm back at work. I've been studying this last 2 years, so I've only been doing clients that I've had. So yeah,
I will share the website now, and they can take it later. Another question, there is so many questions, but I will try to choose the ones that are a little bit, repeating themselves. One of the questions is when we can start and how we can start to engage the child in kitchen activities.
Okay. I suppose the kitchen is the place you spend the most, like you're there every single day for, numerous times. With toddlers, they're hungry 6 times a day. So, this is where it's key. One of the things I did with my babies, like, don't block off your kitchen from your baby and toddler. I think that is the first key. Rather give them experiences, because they'll want to be with you. And the more you I suppose, make it a no-go zone or a danger zone, the more they'll do inappropriate stuff when they come into the kitchen. So, I remember, with my grandchildren, the first experiences I gave them were in arms, boiling the kettle, boiling the kettle for a cup of tea. I would stand them on the two-step. If they were in arms, then I might just hold them with the arm or sit them somewhere, where I could keep them, where they go, oh, steam is hot. So by the time that they were one, they knew not to put their hand near the steam of the kettle. Same with the stove, turning on the gas. Oh, that's hot. We don't put out, demonstrating with your own hand how close you come to something that's hot. The oven's on baking. Oh, hot. So right from in arms, I think babies need experiences in the kitchen where, because they are watching everything, we just need to simplify it to something that they understand, so that by the time they are standing beside you, they already not just grabbing everything because they've had lots of little experiences. So, and you don't have to do it every single meal. You can just do it when you in that frame of mind and you have the time. But watching you cut from their right height rather than from the floor, they're not going to be learning anything if they're standing on the floor and you're standing at a counter and you're just saying, oh, no, don't touch, no, don't touch, oh, no, that's dangerous. So changing your language into stop, wait, look, watch, making it positive experience, and then only putting them down on the floor if they don't cooperate. So, I love a two-step stool that the child can actually start climbing from when they're one, and you can teach them to be controlling their own body in space. I talked a little bit about the advantages of something like that rather than a tower where you're confining them. So they are trying to get out of that space. Children, don't like confinement. It's more for our protection, keeping them safe, that we kind of use high chairs with belts and all of these things, which children then are not learning the skills to confine their own personal body in space. So the more freedom we can give them with clear limits, then, and that is one of the foundational principles of Montessori: freedom with responsibility. And then we take away, they lose the privilege. If they're waving the knife around like this and you said put it on the table, then you say, oh, I think you've chosen not to use the knife today. And they have a clear limit that it's available if they're doing the appropriate thing with it. Then children learn very well and have respect when they know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And the more we demonstrate that in giving clear choices, and the key, as a parent, and it doesn't matter how old your children are, whether they're 2 or 22, the key is following through on what you say. Not giving children thousands of opportunities. They waved the knife around and then you've said put it down, and they do it again and again and again. You say, oh, I see you've decided not to work with mommy in the kitchen right now. And then they get the consequence of not listening to you and cooperating. Whereas when we give them thousands of chances, their behavior generally gets worse and worse because we haven't followed through on something. So I find with all practical life, one of the keys I go to with parents day after day is, yes, give your child freedom, but you have to decide what your rules are within that freedom and be very consistent with what you're doing with your child. Sometimes with really small children, we've just chosen the wrong time. They're too tired, or they're not ready for the activity that we think they should be interested in. So it's really key to observe, and and spontaneous activity based on your child's interest is often the biggest learning experience. Like my 3 grandchildren were over there. I think they were 4, 2, and about 8 months old at the time. And I opened the fridge and there was a bunch of grapes, a bag of grapes, but some of them were really not nice. And, so I took the 3 children outside and I gave them 2 bowls and I said, oh, grapes, good grapes, bad grapes, and they spent like an hour and a half sorting the whole big bag of grapes into, and the 4-year-old was helping the 2-year-old. Good, bad, bad. And, and it turned into this huge, very long collaborative activity with the older ones teaching the younger ones what was a good grape and what was a bad grape. So I think looking for spontaneous activity, babies, introducing them into the kitchen. I used to put my utensils in a bowl while I was cooking and name the utensils while they were banging them on the pots on the floor. I think the first key is including your children in the kitchen and making it a family space rather than an adult space is key to introducing them to, because you'll very soon see your child who's interested in cutting, for instance, and then you can give the first cutting with banana or kiwi fruit or something that is soft and that the knife will go through. And then you're not going to expect them to cut the whole banana at first. You're going to just let them have one chop of the banana and eat that piece, and so, demonstrating in single steps rather than what we've all seen on Instagram as, children being able to do these elaborate activities in the kitchen with their parents. But it doesn't start there. It starts with just one-on-one engagement and practicing with your child, so that you can actually go at their pace and their interest. It's no point if your child hates peas to get them to pod the peas because they're likely not to be interested in it, And so, I found having a water station, like one of those, my daughter and granddaughter were living with us when she was just starting to walk. And so we set up one of those water tanks with a tap on it. And I love telling this story because I think it was instrumental in her being a very good drinker, because it was always available. We set clear limits. If she was using the tap to just spill water, it was put up. But she literally started pouring, using a glass like this when she was, less than a year old, next to the water fountain, I always demonstrated just half filling the glass and carrying it to her table with 2 hands. And, as a result, I just remember watching her. She never asked for a drink. She always knew how to quench her thirst. And you would find her climbing up a 2-step, getting water out of a tap, or even drinking in the bathroom from the tap, because it had been mailed, thirst is one of the things often, even as I'm a bad drinker because I'm a 5th child, I was probably just waiting for my mother to do something, and I just remember thinking, wow, she had the opportunity as a very young child to be able to quench her thirst when she was thirsty. And as a result, it was internalized and she's never asked an adult to meet that need for her. So remember, experiences and positive experiences are always going to be the lifelong teacher. Whether they're negative or positive is going to determine whether your children go back to it. So if something is a negative experience with you, step back, go, what am I doing that's too maybe difficult? Let me go back to what really is a positive experience between me and my child, and then work from that step. And dressing is one that I do at people's houses all the time, because I usually go to parents and they say it's taking an hour and a half to get my child dressed, but they're usually playing elaborate games about getting their child dressed. And so I demonstrate a lot of limits around dressing, which then transfer into other activities.
Perfect. I just shared your website in the chat, so everyone can check it. Emma in the chat is asking, do we have to involve toddlers in practical life every day for it to be beneficial?
Well, I suppose I just, when you say that, I just remember the first sentence probably of my practical life lecture when I studied was, children want to do what they see the adult doing, and that's every single day. It doesn't have to be all practical life every single day, but the more we simplify things, the more the skills that a child will have. So, that's why I focus on the first independences of practical life, like the dressing, like, the dressing and undressing, the feeding themselves. As soon as a child can sit and hold a spoon, give them a spoon, so that when you feeding them, even if, and this is where, like, if they're 9-10 months and you get a little table and chair rather than a high chair, you're already teaching them that if they stand up from the chair or if they get off the chair, the food is not being given to them. So even as little as 9 months, when they can just scoot around furniture, if they're sitting on a chair and they stand up and you go, oh, sit, food, and then you put the food down only when they're sitting, that's probably one of the biggest transfers of skills I did in my baby class is, using a low feeding area for children under 1 starts already teaching them that food will be taken away if you're not sitting. And so, and they want to eat, right? So, they will stand up and walk around with it. So then even in my classroom, I would take the food out of their hand and just go put it back on the plate. So generally they follow the food instead of, making it a big thing, they'll follow the food. So if you have a limit of having food at a table, they will come back to the table, even if their ability to sit is only 1.5 seconds at first, it will increase. So that's a great limit to start with food, and collaborative eating from the minute that they can kind of start feeding themselves. Yes, food is messy. I used to feed my toddlers, my own children, way before I had Montessori experience, naked. Or, just in undies at the table, because, the things parents are worried about is stains on clothes, and we give them bibs to keep everything clean. And, it's really easy to do food first, bathing after. Then you can get the food out of the hair and everything. A lot of people dress their children in their pajamas and then sit them at table, and I go, crazy. So it is a messy business, but the more skills they have, the more, by the time they're 3, they'll have that autonomy, and then adults will be doing less, so.
Mm-hmm. I have actually more questions regarding the kitchen time.
Yeah.
One is, how do you go about teaching knife safe skills and safety?
Okay. I usually have a knife that they can use and that I'm going to let them use, and the first experience would be maybe with a banana or something that even if I give it to them and they go like that, there's going to be a result. And I will actually show, knife, smooth, sharp. And then I would demonstrate holding the knife, again, if you model that every single time with an 8-month-old or a 9-month-old, even when you're cutting, even way before you even give them a knife to cut with, smooth, sharp, mommy touches this part to cut, So it's about, it's very interesting how they're just wildly intelligent children, and if you give them information, they will use it appropriately. And if you remove it when they're not using it appropriately, they'll learn to only demonstrate appropriately. One of the things that a few parents did not like in my class, for instance, was the little pins I used to use for them to pin up their paintings on the corkboard, because they were really sharp. They were about like a centimeter, but they had a really good grip. And instead of the parents pinning up the pictures, I gave the task to the children, and the board had 40 pins stuck in it. So it could have been a very inappropriate. And yet I think I had a child prick their finger once with one of those pins, because they weren't allowed to touch them unless they were pinning up a picture, and I showed them, I picked it out and I went, oh, sharp. And then I demonstrated the pin, so, and I just, every single child learned to pin up a picture. And I had parents that were worried about the pins. Every time, some parents would like pin them all out into a bowl and put them up, and say, this is very dangerous. And I'd say, well, maybe because your child's never been seen something sharp, because they were very little. So parents were worried about them putting them in the mouths, whatever. But, it's just about diligence in inappropriate things. Maybe this story will also help. I had a parent who was renting a house. She had 4 children. Her youngest was about 9 months old. It was doing her head in to try and keep him indoors, because they were renting a house, and outside on the deck, just after the deck, there were all those white stones, and they were little stones. So she hadn't been allowing her little baby outside. He was crawling, he was very active, he was already starting to scoot around furniture, about 8, 9 months. But she said all he wanted to do was go outside. But she was not letting him outside because of these stones, and she was worried about choking hazards and whatever. And it was a lovely deck with 2 little steps down to the stoned area. Well, I said, okay, I'm coming to visit. And she needed to take a child to a doctor or whatever. So I spent 1 hour with this baby out on the deck, letting him climb up and down the stairs. Every time he picked up a stone, I went, oh, stone. And he would lick it. And I would say, oh, stones, not for eating, and put the stone down. And in an hour, he had stopped picking up the stones and putting them in the mouth. So, and now she was free to be able to take him out there, because she could trust him, because she's given him the lessons. We all need Ferne to come and visit for an hour so I can give them an activity. But like often taking the hour or taking the 15 minutes to give them the experience and set the limits is going to save you a lot of trouble in the long term. And I was just amazed that, plus in the hour he learned to climb up and down those stairs proficiently. So she didn't even have to worry about him getting up and down stairs, because I taught him to climb down those 2 stairs backwards and climb up them and climb down them. And he was very interested, because he had never been allowed out there. So, be guided by your child's interest. I'll say that again and again, because that's what Maria Montessori said. The best time for any lesson is when the child is interested. And so, sometimes we have to think on the fly with our little children, because that experience, like the grapes or like on the deck with that child, is something that, it's just, you can't replace it, because that's the experience that child needs at that time to get confidence. So observation of your child's interest is key.
There is questions in the chat. One from Emma. When is the best age to start baking together with a toddler? And one from Star Barlow. How and when to introduce heat, e.g. a stove or oven?
Okay, well, again, I think as soon as your child comes into the kitchen the first time, if they're crawling and you've got something in the oven, that's the time for the lesson, the first lesson. You know, you can get down to your baby's level, you can put them on your lap, you can go, Mummy's baking. Oh, hot, hot, hot. No touching, you know, so that's the first lesson. If that child comes back to the oven again and again and again, you have to do that lesson enough times. For one child, that will be all that child needs. They'll never go and touch the oven. You know, for another child, they're going to have to touch it and experience hot to stop touching. You know, our children have got very different personalities, and one child, you know, like the very strong-willed children, and I had a few of those out of my 4, they need to experience a natural consequence before the lesson is learned. And you know, it's better for them to touch an oven at a year and have a slightly sore finger than for you to keep your child out of the kitchen and for them to always want to be going in the kitchen and you don't allow them, and then suddenly the gates open to the kitchen and your child's climbed up and done something much more dangerous. You know, my daughter, again, you know, we've lived in an extended family with our grandchildren several times, and even with my other children in the house. So I've got a video of my oldest son working he was always in the kitchen. So my grandson, he's 11 now, but he must have been only about 9-10 months, was on his 2-step stool, and he was baking. I mean, he was cooking pasta on the gas stove. And my grandson, I came in and I did the video because there they were standing right side by side. You know, he was right next to the stove, and my son, who didn't have children at the time, was allowing him to stir the pot of boiling pasta with a wooden spoon. And he even goes, hot, and then he shows him how to hold the spoon higher up, you know. And so, you know, like those, again, spontaneous activities where your child is there and they very interested. Don't make it about all the things they can't do. Make it about the one thing that they can be involved in, you know, because we all know the more you say no and don't, the more the child wants to do that very thing, you know. So if the child's, you know, waving the knife, you can say, oh, here's a glass, let's drink, you know, or whatever. So yeah, you have to have a lot of practice as an adult to be able to work with your child as well. So baking, again, don't start with baking something that's elaborate. Have them, you know, you're making pizza dough, let them pour the things in the dough, and the first time let them just be transferring the ingredients in, and learning to wash their hands before they touch something, and then coming and, you know, you knead the dough, and then you let them knead the dough for 5 seconds, you know, and as soon as they start throwing it out of the bowl, oh no, we keep the dough in the bowl. So it's about starting with a simple step for them to be involved in, and then growing that into the steps in the process that they can take over. Like most Montessori under 3 environments will have bread making, for instance, where the child, a child in the classroom does get to make the bread. I've watched this in a few long day care centers where they get to make the bread and carry it, and then the adult puts it in the oven, and then when it comes out the oven, they get to go and serve it to the children, the same child that gets to, you know, knead the bread. So they can gain a lot of skill under 3, but it has to be step by step getting to that point, rather than trying to get them to bake cookies with you and do all 10 steps, because you're going to give up and there's probably nothing going to go in the oven. So so you give the freedom when you've seen that they are collaborative with one or two steps.
I will leave the topic of kitchen right now. There are so many more questions about kitchen, but I think we wouldn't leave the kitchen at all. So let me ask from different area, how can I improve the courtesy language of my child?
The courtesy language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, children can be very rude. Like little children can, like, they very little children, we model please and thank you. So I used to get, parents used to be very upset that when they dropped their kids off at my school, that they wouldn't say hello to me, or they wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't say goodbye. And they were very adamant, why aren't my child, I've told them, say hello, say thank you, say this, say that. And children are resistant. So under threes, I say, focus on just modeling them. Remember, they are internalizing the values that you have at home. So model it at home. Look, actually take a step back and go, do I model please and thank you? You know, do I look in people's eyes when they greet me? So one of the things I did is just tell parents, don't worry about it. I am not going to be offended if your child doesn't say hello to me. I am not going to be offended if your child doesn't say goodbye to me, right? But I'm going to model getting down to your child's level. I found that in the under threes, I never shook hands. Like there's a Montessori thing that where you shake children's hands in the 3 to 6. I never did that. I put my hand out. If their child put their hand on my hand, I would cover the hand and say, oh, look at my eyes. Hi. If they didn't look at my eyes, I just modeled it the next day. You know, they weren't in trouble for not looking at my eyes. And I think this is key. If children get in trouble for not having manners, they'll get worse manners. That's my experience, you know. I used to think my children had bad manners, and then I used to have all their friends' mothers tell me how good their manners were. You know, so, you know, don't focus on the manners, focus on instilling values. Like, you know, I find when I don't look in people's eyes, they don't say hello back. You know, give information and just be courteous yourself, and demonstrate that it's hard to wait. You know, it's really hard to wait. One of the ways we can teach courtesy is by giving our children that understanding that it's, for instance, a lot of parents get very upset when they're talking to someone and their child's going, mommy, 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 mommy. They think that's very rude and whatever. But what are they? Your children are feeling very jealous at that moment, right? Your toddler is, as soon as there's competition, we know that your child's not interested in you, your partner walks in the door and suddenly your child wants you, because they want to be the most important thing all the time. They're very egocentric when they're little. It's all about me, myself, I. So just, you know, making eye contact with your child. Oh, it's so hard to wait for mommy. Mommy's talking to daddy. Mommy's talking to my friend. Hold my hand. And I'll, you know, Simone Davies actually, she said she learned this from me, but I'm convinced I learned it from her. Anyway, she used to have her child hold her hand or put her hand on them, and say, oh, as soon as I'm finished talking, I will answer your question. So she would squeeze their hand to let them know she had acknowledged them and that they were really important. I think that is one of the keys when they're little, is getting down to their level rather than talking to them from the top, gets them to be more cooperative with courtesy, and and just saying please and thank you yourself. I think I demonstrated more around food than in any other place in my classroom. And I think the home courtesy about, just demonstrating, oh, please pass me the potatoes. We use the tongs, not our hands, all of those things around food. There's just thousands and thousands of lessons that you can do around mealtime. So eating as a family, if you can, every day. I know that all the psychologists and all the research says that if you eat as a family around a table rather than children eating separately, it becomes a really hub of communication. And if you demonstrate that from when they're young, then by the time, if you're not eating meals together with toddlers, you're unlikely to be eating at table with your teenagers. So, it's something that has to start and grow and become a family tradition for it to actually, and I think around meal time is where grace and courtesy can be demonstrated, and that value can be instilled in a family for life. So that's where I would start, with actually doing grace and courtesy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. Another question. Hold on, I lost it. Okay. How to encourage my child's independence when he becomes frustrated? For example, first they say, me do it, then get upset when they are having a hard time, and then they say, mommy do it. And you try to encourage to try, which results in a crying outbursts.
Yeah. Yeah, they wear all their emotions right on their whatever a child's feeling, you're going to experience it. Again, I think a lot of their frustration comes from the fact that they're trying to do something that's too hard. So for instance, if they can't pull up their pants, but they really want to, that's the activity that you're going to have to slow down and do as many times a day that's appropriate. So so that they can have the experience. And that's why it goes hand in hand with toileting, because if you do simplify their clothing to sometimes the clothes are just too hard for them to do themselves. So and I used to talk about this daily in the classroom. Can you just simplify their clothing until they can dress themselves? And then you can start using jeans and t-shirts with buttons and tight necks. Because remember, again, the first experience of positive is going to make them be able to have the concentration to do things that are more tricky. So they give up because it's often we've been dressing them, and we've been dressing them really quickly, and now it's not. So their experience is it's very quick to get dressed. But really, for them to do it themselves is going to take that much longer. So that, again, I suppose I'll go back to, if we start that younger and do it collaboratively, they have more confidence to take over the skills. But if your child's 3 and you've been dressing them, then you're going to have to go through that frustration of, oh, it's really tricky. It's really tricky. It helps to put it, even sit next to your child with a pair of pants and slow down the steps in the process. Because often, I just remember this one little boy in my classroom, he used to just do this with his hand. As soon as he got his feet in, because his mom used to pull his pants up really fast. So he didn't even know that you had to hold the pants to get them up, So it's just slowing down the actual steps in a process, where the first thing is letting them see that there's actually 2 holes for legs, in a pair of pants, and then working from there. But I just acknowledging their feelings and not doing it for them, if they're not going to collaborate. So if they say, oh no, mommy, you do it. Oh, it's tricky. Hold here. I'll hold here. So as long as your child's working with you, help them to have success. But if your child's like, you know, then when you're ready to, I've told, like, it's a man, they love the collaborate word. They learn what it means by the fact that you're not doing anything unless they're helping you. And so I say, when you're ready to collaborate, let me know. When I do toileting with children, I walk out the bathroom and I just say, when you're ready to collaborate, I'll come back and help you get dressed. So, you know, it works every single time, because they want to get out, you know, they want to move from the bedroom or from the bathroom. So you give your assistance when they will collaborate with you. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest key then.
How to let child be consistent in putting away things or toys when they are 2 years old?
Okay. From my years of going into parents' homes, the biggest problem with children packing away is that they have too much. Right? That's age appropriate for them to pack away. So, you know, simplifying a shelf at your home, like especially if they've not been packing away at all, is to put 3 activities out that your child's very interested in. Have them, if they love cars, and I often go and sort out people's toys. I was at someone's house not very long ago till 11 p.m. at night, sorting out toys. But he loved dinosaurs, but he had 150 dinosaurs. Now, what 2-year-old is going to pack away 150 dinosaurs? No 2-year-old is going to do that. So I said, choose his 10 favorite ones, right? Put them in a basket. When he's packed away his dinosaurs, then he can have another 10, you know. So again, it's simplify, give them less. Children of 2 only build with 10 blocks. They don't build with 150 blocks. So, you know, simplify it into a number of objects that your child has the focus and concentration to pack away, so that the task can be complete, and you only give them another task. You know, say the balls are all over the house and he now wants his cars. You can say balls in the basket, then cars. And you can make it a green ball, you know, find the blue ball, you know. So you have to get, I find often we want to just do too much as a parent and give them everything. So it's best to simplify your home environment till they are packing away 5 objects before you put 10 objects in a basket, basically. That's the whole lecture. So that answers your question.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out. There was another interesting question. It goes with the work in the kitchen, but maybe it will be useful also in other areas. My question is how to regulate water source in the environment or home, as even though we have limited resources, they also know other sources of water in the house or environment. And what do you say, or how do you do to redirect them to use only the place you have set up for water source and in limited time?
Okay, so water source, they wash their hands, and that happens numerous times a day, right? So it is a demonstration that the earlier you do it and the clearer you are on limits and following through on those limits, the better it is. Okay. And I know that for all my grandchildren who have had the 2-step stool, like you teaching washing hands around going to the toilet, eating or whatever. So having washing hands in the bathroom as well as the kitchen can be very helpful when your children are little. If they're doing inappropriate things with water all the time, like running. So with washing hands, if you demonstrate putting the plug in, turning the tap on, only putting a little bit of water in the basin, and then turning the tap off, and then letting them wash their hands in a little bit of water in the basin, and then pulling out the plug. Because remember, they've been watching us. We turn on the tap, wash our hands, the water's running the whole time. So, and let's face it, well, in my classroom, I used to have a ball scooping activity by the basin so that they could do something interesting in the basin because they love play. It's a very calming thing, water. So, water play is one of, or water work or play is one of the best ways to build concentration with little children because they love water. So if they're always turning on your taps, they're very interested in water. So what I used to do is put 2 bowls outside on the grass or on the deck, with the hose pipe dripping, literally dripping, so that to fill the bowl, it literally took ages to fill the bowl. And they would be drinking the drips out and, waiting for the bowl to be filled with water. And that's a great baby activity, in a nappy outside with a tap, with it just literally dripping, that they can experience water. I've done that with every single baby I've ever worked with, and it's a way to get them to be entertained for at least half an hour. And so there is a hand washing video with I've done hand washing activities around a year when they can climb up that stool. That's the first time to demonstrate hand washing, and you just keep on doing it in a very limited way. If they keep on turning the tap off and off, enough water now, time to climb down. You can close off the bathroom if they're not listening to you, and going to every single water source and turning on and leaving taps on everywhere. Then it's more about setting the limits early and going, the new rule is the bathroom, mommy closes the bathroom if you don't climb down when I say, so yeah, water, giving them an appropriate thing to do with water when they're very interested, like directing them to something that they can mess with water is very helpful, and again, you can put a limit when the bowls are full, and that's how much water you have for this game. If you have limited water source where you live, then you can't turn on the hose or whatever, but you can give them a container with a tap, and when the water's finished in the container, that's the end of their water activity today. So it's about just and maybe they throw themselves on the floor and have a huge tantrum. More water tomorrow, that's disappointing. So more and more, it's not, most of us know how to give children freedom. It's learning how to deal with their emotions when they don't like the limits that you set is key to us giving them more and more activity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. From different topic, how can I help in individual work? My toddler keeps clinging on me and is not willing to do things alone. How can I encourage him to do things alone?
Okay. I'm assuming that you mean like activities, sitting, our first children can be very dependent on us. you know, to be the one that engages their attention all the time. And again, we have to build their confidence in doing things for themselves in very small increments. So for instance, say, I mean, I don't know how old is this child? Maybe just that would help.
She's talking about a toddler. So
A toddler, so probably plus 18 months. You know, first, you know, it's interesting, like, again, just a first child is often much more clingy, just because they've had us 24/7. And so they've been used to us having that much more time to sit with them and to do things with them. So it's just a key that when your child starts, you know, walking, it's about us also separating ourselves and saying, you know, oh, okay, stick that one, and then mommy's coming back. You know, so giving little opportunities for them to do one thing before you come back, not allowing them to cling on you when, if you say, oh, you don't feel like doing work now, then you just stop the activity. It's better to stop an activity than to try and to continually be trying to, as soon as we're in a power struggle with a child, whether it's doing an activity, feeding, you know, getting in the bath, out the bath, it's better to step back and say less and do less than to try and fix the problem in that, because a power struggle, nobody wins in a power struggle. It usually ends badly for one of us. You know, the parent gets really frustrated, or the child is very frustrated. So, you know, I find the bath time is a great way to start setting those kind of limits. Like, it's time to get out the bath. No, and they don't want to listen. You say, you pull out the plug or I'll pull out the plug. And they don't move. They carry on playing and ignoring you. Then you just pull out the plug. The natural consequences, they start feeling cold because there's no water in the bath anymore, you know? And so, you know, it's about, especially with our first children, is really us stepping back, and because often we've walked with them everywhere, you know, we've kind of been beside them as much as possible all the time. So when they say, oh, they want their bear in the bedroom, for instance, mommy come, mommy come, mommy come. You want your bear? Mommy will sit on the couch. Get your bear and come and show mommy. You know, so it's about starting to, if they're very clingy, you've got to give them little activities that mean that they have to go away from you 10 steps, then 20 steps, then 30 steps, and come back. Just like a crawling child gets confidence, you know, the minute we are with our child all the time, I find generally I'm speaking to the parent about learning to step back a little bit and give them the space and even the frustration of not listening to them. If we do everything our child says when they tell us to do it, we get more and more issues with them wanting us 24/7. You know, if I'm drinking this water and my child asks for the water and I just give it to them straight away, say, no, mommy's drinking. You know, I'll pour you some water. So I think the biggest thing with toddlers being very frustrated is because they're used to you doing it instantly for them as a parent. And so we need to give them little experiences all the time of waiting, and demonstrating that everybody has to wait. You know, often parents have a lot of problems when a second child is born, for instance, because the first child is used to you jumping at everything, and then the second child means you can't. And so they really can't cope with that. So, sorry. So you can say to the baby, you can also demonstrate that a baby waits. Oh, mommy's giving your brother breakfast. You have to wait 5 minutes and I'll give you your food. So demonstrate that, daddy has to wait, mommy waits, everybody waits. And it is hard to wait, I think that's one of the biggest frustrations. It's hard not to be able to do it instantly. I get so frustrated when something doesn't work the first time. So, acknowledging feelings is one of the biggest communication skills that most of us aren't very well trained in naming a whole myriad of feelings and just letting them be. I've got a great story that I just found about feelings and dealing with big feelings, which I might, I'll scan and send to Lucy. Maybe she can post it up. It's called How the Turtle Found His Shell. And it's all about, a child being able to use 3 steps to kind of communicate their feelings, and feelings to be just okay. They're just feelings, they pass, they're not right or wrong. So we need to that's probably the top parenting skill that I think, and it doesn't matter how many times you've practiced it, you still have to practice it, and you have to practice it, and we're still not very good at it. Even after 20 years, you still, especially with your own family, we tend not to really acknowledge them very well before trying to give them advice, so it's a skill that if you can master it, it's one of the ones that will stand us the most in good stead through our lives, I think, wherever we are. Empathy.
Yeah, we will have an extra module in the course about emotional development.
Yeah, it will be great, Lucy.
Yeah, another question here is, please, can you suggest 3 tips to get a toddler toilet trained? Thank you very much in advance.
Okay. 3 tips for toilet training. My top 3 tips. Start early. Or start now.
There is very many questions on when to start, and if 6 months is too early or 8 months is too early. There's 10 questions.
Okay, so we've already mentioned the collaborative dressing. As soon as your child is fighting you on a change table to lie still or not get a nappy on or whatever, time to take them off the change table. Okay, so that would be my first year tip, is if your child's older than 1 year, you can't go back and do that. No worries, right? Start today, right? The dressing and undressing is a precursor to toileting. If they have confidence with dressing and undressing, and you've already got those collaborative skills, toileting is going to be much easier. So whether your child, and this is something, if I go to somebody's house and they're trying to do toileting, but their child clings to them the whole time, like that other mommy was sharing. Every time they try to do toileting with them, they're just clinging, and acting like a rag doll, right? And they won't cooperate at all. This is where you get the dressing stool. I mean, with that little boy, he was 20 months. They were very, very keen Montessori parents. They had a beautiful Montessori home environment, but toileting and food, that child got his way. He could eat with his mom's fork, his dad's fork. He could throw 10 forks on the floor, because I sat with dinner to find out what was going on, right? And they just kept on giving him another implement if he threw that one away. He could eat his mom's food off her plate, his dad's food off his plate, So as a result, it was a boundary issue, because the parents they had no boundaries with him. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted. So toileting was going to be hard unless they decided on what the rules were. So for instance, I put the dressing stool in the bathroom. He was I went 3 days in a row, and by the third day, he was using the toilet and dressing and undressing his bottom part. Because I was consistent with where he could dress. He wanted to carry a toy into the bath, into the toilet when he was eating. And so as a result, he was more playing with the toy than listening to his parents. So it was like, oh, you love dinosaurs. It's going to sit on the basin. And when your pants are off and you've sat on the potty, then Fern will give you a toy back. Right? So it's most of the time it's, and starting early. So the tip is starting early, working on the dressing on a daily basis and the undressing. Do we sometimes have to dress our children because we have to get out the door fast? Yes. But the more experiences they have, like, always use a dressing stool. Start with a dressing stool as soon as they are fighting you on a change table. Just trying to think, how I can demonstrate. With a child that's not walking, you can still use a dressing stool. You can put them on the dressing stool. I don't know if you can see me. You can sit them on a dressing stool against the wall, and you can put your feet up on the wall on either side of your child so that they're contained in this little space between your legs. That means that when they stand up, they can hold on your legs. When they sit down, but you can start that eye contact and actually start building the communication around how a difficult task, because dressing involves a lot of steps, right? So you have to start with little things, and toileting requires you to get a lot of collaboration, because you cannot force your child to do things about their body in your timing. You've got to actually have a set time where, like, toileting must start with setting up the environment with a toileting area. And I do set up a toileting area for 1 to 18 months with a potty area as well as the toilet. So that they can choose, and you can just have demonstration of take your nappy off, sit on the potty. Oh, nothing, put them in the bath. I mean, when do we go to the toilet? When we wake up in the morning, so have set times where the toilet routine, rather than the nappy the potty routine replaces the changing routine. In other words, you introduce a potty every time you take your nappy, the nappy off. We sit on a potty, and then nothing now, nappy back. So you can do it way before you even, because you're not going to know what awareness they have if they don't have nappies on. You have to have your children nappy free to be able to learn about your child's abilities. So, that is key as well. Take the nappy off and expect to have a time of mess. I think disposable nappies worldwide, I've come across this, is that as adults and parents, we're not prepared for the mess of toileting, because it's not been a messy process for you. In this day and age, it's not been messy. It's been wrap up, throw away. And now suddenly you want it to go, you want it done in 3 days, but children don't have the awareness of their bodies because of the disposable nappies. So they don't know what it feels like to be wet. They don't know what it feels like to have urine, running down their legs. Because it's been a very clinical process for the adult. So they are not I mean, most of my communication around toileting now is preparing the adult, not the child. The child's ready for toileting. The parent isn't. Because of their mindset. So, it's about us because if we are anxious inside, or if we're frustrated, there's no ways we're going to get collaboration from a toddler. They're very in tune with what's going on in our bodies. And the more we're trying to do things and make it right and make it perfect, the more they'll feel incapable of meeting our expectations. So it's really about us getting prepared first, and having the knowledge and and then transferring that with these, starting early, getting to know our child's body, letting them get to know their body, and make it a very natural thing rather than an event in your calendar. Toileting, again, they're much more interested in toileting and being collaborative between a year and, between 18 months and 2 than they are between 2.5 and 3. I can tell you that. So if you learn a lot of skills, even if you shelve it after they've got a lot of skills for some reason, like you're traveling or something, it's going to be much better for them to have experience young than for you to wait until you move into your new house and they can talk. Most people say, oh, don't they have to be able to talk to do toileting? Actually, toileting is much easier before they can talk. Because when they're talking, they're saying no to you all the time, and then that can stop the process because you're responding to their language and thinking that they're not ready. But it's just a new experience, and so they're resistant to it. And we have to kind of lead the way. I mean, I have parents of 5-year-olds telling me that their child's not ready for toileting. And I go, that is not true. Your child hasn't had positive experiences, and you've been handling your child that they think they need the nappy. They don't. I've never taken more than 3 days to get a child out of a nappy. It doesn't matter how old they are. So
yeah, this topic actually opened so many questions. I get so many direct messages on Zoom. And there are also very many questions from the registration forms. To make it in hex, I would say, there is a question, for example, here on Zoom from Nisi. I have a different toilet training question. I started toilet training with my child when she turned 18 months. First 3 days went very well, but from the fourth
new experience.
From the 4th day, she wouldn't want to enter the toilet. She's now 2.5 years old and still not toilet trained because she just doesn't want to go when in the toilet. And another question very similar to this one is from Maria. My 19-month-old will only sit on the potty with clothes on and cries when I try to take off her pants. How can I get her to sit without crying? I read it shouldn't be stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, first of all, I just want to say this is very common. Okay. And it does relate to the fact that one of the biggest things is children don't really know the feeling of no clothes. Remember, they have been toileting with a nappy that takes away the sensations. They're very technologically advanced these days, nappies. So they really feel comfortable with this stuff around their body. And so, yes, like, you want it to be a positive experience. So if they're very resistant, I often, when a child's been going in a nappy to do a poo, for instance, I've just done a little boy who's 4.5, via Zoom over, it didn't even take 3 days. It only took 1.5 days, but literally from 2, he started to do this. Every time his mom tried to get him in the bathroom, he would go. So the whole family thought he had this whole aversion to the smell of poo, and they've been buying fresheners and it sounds stupid, but parents try to meet their child's needs. So they trying to go, this is something physical that he can't cope with, So they were making sure that they made sprays when anyone else in the family went to the toilet, everything. But I said to her, like, does he gag when he goes into the corner and does his poo in his bedroom? Does he gag at the smell? She said, no, he just comes and tells me he's done his poo, right? So we just transferred toileting to the bathroom. Like, You have to set a limit. I said, you're 4, all 4-year-olds, we do toileting in the bathroom, because it starts to impact, as soon as they get older, it starts to impact them socially. If a child's used to a nappy and they have to go to a Montessori school, for instance, here in Australia, if they're not toilet trained, they're not allowed to wear nappies to school when they're 3. But what happens then is parents give them a nappy when they come home. And so they actually don't go, even if they need to go to the bathroom, they're waiting for the nappy. Now that is going to have a lot of behavior issues, because if you need to go to the toilet at 10 o'clock in the morning and you have to wait till your mommy gives you a nappy at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you can imagine that's going to and it was causing behavioral issues at school. So it was imperative that we got him to use a toilet, for it not to affect his, and really, he was so ready. He just needed to be told, gagging is not going to work. It's your smell and you have to be in it. And as soon as I told him that and he started gagging, I said, well, mommy's not coming and she's not giving you a nappy. You can do it on the floor or you can do it on the toilet. It's your choice. And if you do it on the floor, Ferne will show you how to clean it up. And he did it the first day. As soon as so often it's in our handling and our feeding their anxiety. It's a new experience. So we need to acknowledge, oh, it feels different to have no nappy on in 2 weeks, If children have been used to going and standing behind the couch to do a poo, then you're not going to be able to get them to sit to do a poo. It's better for them to be able to hold a potty between their legs and poo standing up for the first time, because that's been their experience. And so now trying to get them to climb up on a toilet, sit on a toilet, do all these things. So, I suppose we've opened a can of worms here, because every single child is unique. And I usually work individually with where has the issue initiated? Is it from something that the parent's been doing that we need to just change what they're doing and change what they're saying or change what they're doing? Or because very rarely is it an issue with the child. It's an issue with the environment that we need to just make more appropriate for the child. Or it's in us setting certain limits that we haven't been setting, or it's in our reactions. Like I've had a child that's very scared of the toilet because the mom jumped the first time she pushed the button, and he so every time the toilet flushed, he was jumping and acting like it was a scary thing. So I had to have an activity with him in the bathroom, flushing the toilet, letting him look in, like, getting him over that wasn't a scary thing. It's the noise of the toilet. It goes down the pipes. Sometimes just a simple explanation of why there's a noise or whatever. The parent has to say something different and do something different to get a different result. And that kind of is probably what around toileting, whenever there's issues, and both of you have brought up a thing that often happens. A child, it's like everything is fun the first few times you're doing it. And then when it's something that you have to carry on doing every single day of your life, it becomes not so interesting. But we have to go to the toilet for the health of our bodies. So it's not something that parents need to go, oh, he's not ready, I'll try again in 6 months. Oh, he's not ready, I'll try again in 1 year's time. We do a disservice to the child when we think that it's because for some reason they're not ready to develop. Would we stop talking to our child because they didn't want to talk? No. Language, we talk to our children constantly every day, trusting that their language will come out at 2. And yet we don't do any experience around toileting, and we suddenly want to do it in 3 days. So there's a very different mindset of the adult around toileting, which is probably most of my work at the moment, is just really trying to get adults to see that this is a developmental milestone. It's not something that we can put into a calendar at convenience for us as adults. It's something that, gives children, we know that, old people feel totally dependent because they can't care for their basic needs, like going to the toilet and whatever. And so going to the toilet is one of the first independences that we really need to focus on. And if it's achieved as a milestone before they're 3, I can tell by looking at a child whether they are confident toilet goers or they still rely on their parents to do dressing, undressing, whatever, because it tells on their other independence to be able to do things for themselves, because it's their own body. And if you've got confidence in your own body, it just translates to so many things socially. A child by 3 needs to be able to ask a strange adult to help them in the bathroom. Most 3-year-olds still need a little bit of help with cleaning themselves because it's not a task. Their arms just aren't long enough yet. So, their body proportions aren't great. So we need to give them skills to be able to communicate to adults that are strangers with a very, personal thing. So the more confidence they have before they go out into an environment that is social, the more your child will be ready for everything else that environment offers them. So it's one of the keys that I go, like, between 18 months and 2.5, you want to resolve all your toileting issues as much as possible. Yes, there are developmental delays and things that can make it, but in my experience, the whole thing with boys are going to be later. I mean, I've got 3 boys, they were all toileted before they were 2, because they ran around naked so that I didn't have to wash nappies. So have children changed, or have what adults are doing changed? And I think it's more about what adults are doing and expecting. And this whole thing, if children cry, it means that, or children are upset, they must not be ready. Or if children don't want to, they're not ready. And it's absolutely the opposite. They just need more positive experiences, and they need a confident adult to be working with them, that is making the decisions, not the child making the decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers it in a nutshell.
Yes, I think it does. I have one last toilet learning question, and then one question that Emma just asked, and I think it's really nice to wrap up everything with it. The last one toilet learning question is about nighttime, and there are, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 questions that I see about nighttime. Child being potty trained during the day for more than a year and still wetting the bed during the night, or demanding the nappies during the night and the nappies are still wet.
Okay. Again, so when I whether a child's being just toileted in the day, or they've been toileted for 1.5 years, like some of your questions, and then they're trying to get them out of the night nappy. Again, it's the best time for them to learn is when they're interested and focused. So when your child is doing daytime training, it's the best time to take off the night napping. As soon as they are using the potty collaboratively, like 80% of the time in the day, and yes, there can be a few not getting to the toilet on time, or they're sick and it doesn't work, and all of those things, but that is when the focus is on. Now, when we put the night nappy on, generally, if a child has started to get the awareness of the toilet thing, remember, they don't generally pee unconsciously. Even at night, if we need the toilet, what happens? we're tossing and turning, our body's uncomfortable, we need to go to the toilet. So, that's a thing to observe, is I say to parents, is your child really peeing through the night? Or are they peeing in the early hours of the morning when they start waking up? Go and check their nappy at midnight for 3 days in a row and see if they are really wet early on in the evening, in the middle of the night. So that's one test they can do. The second test is they can, a lot of parents think that, well, because they've got a night nappy on, they are not diligent about taking that nap, about toileting being the first thing that happens in the morning. Because they've got a nappy on. So the parents don't have to think about it till 9 a.m. when that nappy is full of pee. So you're not changing your child's habit into what has to happen when they haven't got a nappy on, is wake up and go to the toilet, just like we do, right? So, and unless the parent takes the nappy off, they're not going to be diligent to make toileting the first thing that happens. So one skill I give parents is waking up 15 minutes before your child generally starts to stir in the morning, and being attentive to when they're starting to stir, even while you've got a nappy on. And you say, oh, it's toilet time. Get them out of bed, take them to the toilet, nappy off for the day, right? So it's got to be the first thing that occurs for you to change your child's habits, because we are creatures of habit. 5 minutes to break a habit, 6 months to build a good one, right? So children are no different. We have habitually let them wee and not pay attention to the fact. So, a lot of the time when I speak to parents about the night nappy, they are still giving their bottles at night for their child to drink through the night. Now, is that the time to drink? No, the time to drink is when you're awake. So often if parents are going, but he doesn't drink in the day, he'll only drink from his bottle at night. So it's the adult that has to change that pattern for the child. You have to give drinks in the day, and maybe he will go thirsty for a few days because he's had a habit of putting in all his fluids at night. So you have to only make drinks available, if that is the case. And every case is totally unique in terms of, but most of the time, I just have to change something the adult is doing and the child's development takes place. So, and kind of maybe through what I'm saying, you'll go, oh, that's the thing I do, or that's the thing I do, So, but the best time to do night training is straight after day training. If there's a gap, it can take much longer. Some people who have been bedwetters just expect their children to be bedwetters. And so that can be a huge mindset thing, that they have really bad memories about their own toileting and wetting the bed and everything. And they don't want their child to get a negative feeling about themselves. So they actually pander to something that's not even the child's experience. It's all about their own experience in toileting. I had one mom who she was so scared to do toileting because she had one of those alarm systems when she was a child, and she wet her bed all the way up to university because the alarm system was done in the 70s and it used to shock her. And she only discovered as an adult that actually was true, and her mom didn't believe her that it was hurting her. So, she had so much psychological damage of her own toileting experience and the consequences that she was so scared to take her child out of nappies, thinking that she was going to somehow psychologically damage her child. So, and yet her child was, we worked with her, and we worked with her child. I just did a home consult, and her child was quite capable, and her child got out of day and night nappies at the same time. But so often it's just about us getting the support from something that we fear, of what will go wrong, instead of having somebody to support you to see it can go right. So, the more I talk about toileting, the more I see it as, fun, quite a big issue in parenting, that like sets a stage for how we communicate with our child. Because if it's stressful, every crisis becomes stressful, instead of it us normalizing everything that happens around it and really using it as an opportunity to really build relationship with a child and give them confidence in themselves, because we all have to learn that, and it's very interesting. I spoke to a massage therapist recently, who said that most of her massage work with adults, was because they didn't do normal bowel movements, because they didn't like going to toilet in public places. So they didn't go at work, and they didn't, do you know what I mean? They had aversion to using the toilet in public spaces. And so she's got to massage them to get their bodies to work properly as adults. And they don't even like talking about it as a problem. And I go, well, where did that come from? Did it come from then, or did it come from handling when they were little? So I really do think it's something that, like waiting till later isn't going to help you do it better. So that would be my final thing, is just start now, get the support you need. Don't let a child have a problem if it's not progressing in a few days, it means something needs to change.
Yep, thank you. And then the last one question from Emma that I promised, and then I think we would wrap it up because we are here for 2 hours already. Is there one thing you wish parents did differently? If you could only tell parents to do one thing differently, what would it be?
Slow down, be present.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, I think, if I had my time over again, I've got 4 children, adult children. Sometimes we're too focused on getting it right instead of just relationship, and doing it perfectly, instead of, it's between me and my child. And just slow down and, be present with your child at whatever stage they're at, because that's going to be key to building a relationship.
Thank you. Thank you very much for making the time, for being part of the Childhood Potential Conference, for being part of our new course that we have created. And thanks for making the time to be here with us for these 2 wonderful hours. And I also want to say thanks to everyone who was here live, asked questions. It was really nice to see you. And I hope we will see each other very soon again.
And I would love to have spoken to each of you individually to meet your, because I know each need is totally unique to you. But, reach out if you have an issue that you're struggling with, and do the conference. I'm sure you'll learn so much from the 12 speakers, and it's been lovely to be here with you all.
Yeah. And actually, Ferne is talking about this course. I will put a link to the course when we will be sending the recording, but I think you have already seen the website if you follow some of our emails, but I will just put a little link there. Okay. Good night to those in Europe. Have a great evening and afternoon to those in the US. And to Ferne, have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.